From the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Foundation, this is Exploring the Question. I'm your host, Gleaves Whitney, Executive Director at the Ford. Today, we seek to understand the fallout from the U.S. surrender and withdrawal from Afghanistan. My guest today is Freshta Tori, who was able to come to the United States almost 1 decade ago, but all of her family had to remain behind, and they suffered from all of the vicissitudes of civil war. Freshta, thank you so much for joining us for this very important discussion that we're having. Tell us about Freshta Tori.
Great, thank you so much, Gleaves. I am a political asylee from Kabul, Afghanistan. I came here about 6 years ago when the Taliban shut down my school. So I came abroad to the United States to continue pursuing my education, going to high school and now in college. And I have to say, I have been very, very fortunate to pursue and, be given the opportunity that I have been given, because there's so many other women, so many other students who will, never get to experience the life that I have. And so I'm very grateful. And now I am a human rights activist, and I have been, trying very hard, specifically with the current situation in Afghanistan, because I feel like a lot of lawmakers are not taking this seriously, especially the Biden administration. And so, there's a lot of work that needs to be done with this. And so I really hope that I can, make a difference and help out with the lives that are being sacrificed because of this.
And in previous conversations, Freshta, you and I have talked about the dire straits your family was in. Tell us a little bit about the suffering your family has been through in recent years.
Yeah, so my family belongs to the ethnic minority, the Hazara in the country. And unfortunately, although we are native to the country, we have been facing a genocide for hundreds of years now, really. And it's very unfortunate that the rest of the world doesn't know. We went from being the majority of the population once to now being one of the very minority. And, we are not only persecuted by other factions and ethnic groups in the country, but we are also a very big target for the Taliban. And one of the biggest reasons is because the majority of Hazaras practice Shia Islam. And on top of that, we have very Asiatic futures. And because of that, for some reason, we are seen to be inferior to the rest of the population. And Hazaras are also a big target because we are the only group really in the country that is very progressive, and we are pro women's rights and gender equality and all of that, and very pro education, all things that are big threats to the Taliban, to all these terrorist groups.
So was there a period of time, Freshta, after the United States began its involvement in Afghanistan in 2001 after 9/11, was there a time when things were looking up for your ethnic group, when women were being educated?
Yeah, I guess, I was born towards the very end of the first war, the first time the Taliban took over. But, I remember as a kid, my cousins and my other women in my community wearing burqas. But then throughout my lifetime, that changed. I saw women not having to cover their heads, their faces, or anything. Women becoming journalists, playing sports. They were on TV, without having to have this fear, because they pushed for so long to have those basic rights, to finally make the policymakers in our country know that we are human too. And that's one of the biggest things that I've been mourning with, what happened, the decision that was made, and how the country was really handed over to the terrorists. That's something that a lot of Afghan women worked extremely hard for, and especially Hazara women. Being Hazara is already super, super, hard to just exist in Afghanistan. But on top of that, being a woman, you have to work extremely hard. And, it's just very, very sad that all of those rights were taken away. And now who knows if that chance will come again. who knows how much longer it will take to get back up there.
And you were fortunate. You had the opportunity because of your brains and your ambition. You were able to come to the United States, and you are a student at Calvin University, and you've been involved in the Cook Leadership Academy. That's where I got to meet you, over at Grand Valley State University. So you've had the opportunity to get out of that situation, but your immediate family suffered a lot. And in particular, I remember the first time we sat down and had coffee together, Freshta, you were telling me about your sister, Maria, and some of the things that she was going through. And before we sort of say what happened here real recently, tell us a little bit about the struggle that Maria and some of your family specifically were having back in Afghanistan.
Yeah, my sister Maria, she for a very long time tried very hard to pursue her education, and she really wanted to become a doctor in the country, but unfortunately there aren't many opportunities for that. And I remember the number of times she would go to the university. Twice it got blown up, and other times she was constantly receiving threats because she was a woman. And a lot of people were telling her, like, you should not be studying, you should not be doing this, you're a woman, you need to go in the house, not show your face in public, just a bunch of very sexist attacks that she received. And then on top of that, my mom was constantly attacked in public for allowing her girls to get an education, and that especially, in the West. And, I remember like my mom getting beat so many times in front of crowds because she was allowing this to happen. And, it's things like that. I feel like that people don't realize how much sometimes you have to sacrifice for you to even, practice just one of your basic human rights.
Just to receive an education and to live in peace.
Yep. To just breathe or even go grocery shopping like down the street. You can't do that.
How old is Maria?
She is in her 30s.
Tell us a little bit about her.
Yes, well, Maria she is a very, very hardworking lady. She has 4 children, and she is, constantly just very focused on giving them the opportunities that were taken away from her. Right now, all 4 of her kids are able to speak multiple languages, and they are all under the age of 11. So, for her to be able to make sure that her kids can have a bright future and, get the opportunities that she missed is, just so motivating and so inspiring. And obviously that's something that a lot of mothers do, but in a country like Afghanistan, that is extremely hard.
Well, Freshta, in the last week, we've talked a couple of times, and you've expressed a great deal of concern about the fate of your family. But when I talked to you earlier today, you had very good news. Please share that news with us.
Yes, so after a lot of hard work and yelling at a lot of different lawmakers, my family was able to be evacuated. And, that's something that I will forever be grateful for. I want to celebrate and, go out there and just, scream. And because it really was a miracle. I don't know what I could have done anymore at that point for my family to get out and for my mom to be safe, for my sister and her kids to be safe. So everything that happened, it's definitely an event that I will never, ever forget. At the same time, I'm having this big internal conflict because my heart is still bleeding and mourning and grieving the hundreds and thousands of other people who aren't able to make it out, for all of those girls who fought for all of their rights and all of those kids who no longer will be able to go to school.
Absolutely. It's such a tragedy. It's this rolling tragedy, and it hasn't played out yet. We don't know what the ultimate victims count is going to be. We don't know how many people are actually going to be able to get out. I mean, we know that there are tens of thousands of our Afghan friends who are trying to get out. There are still, well, I think the estimates are that there were 10 to 15,000 Americans that were trying to get out. right after the Taliban took over Kabul, but we don't know because not everybody registered with the embassy or deregistered with the embassy when they left, and so it's a chaotic situation to be sure. But we're really happy for your family's great news. Freshta, let me ask you, who enabled your family to be evacuated? Are there particular agencies or the military or Congress people that you were in touch with? Who do you think actually pulled this off so that your family could get out of there?
Yeah, no, this was a combination of so many minds. There were agencies involved, there were congressmen involved, there was the White House involved, the military was involved, and obviously my family themselves and their motivation. And it was definitely a lot of work, and the State's Department, just really a combination of so many different agencies and powers and levels of the government. And without all of that, I don't see how possible it would have been to get them out.
So when do you plan on seeing your family?
I'm not sure. Right now, it's still a very sensitive process. We don't know all the details, but hopefully that's something that we can figure out in the times coming soon. So
what's the first thing you're going to say to them and do when you're reunited with them?
I do think the first thing I'll do is probably just like scream and just run and like attack them and hug them, especially my nieces and my nephews and the older two that I raised. And the things that those kids endured the last week. My mom, this was basically her third war that she had gone through, and my sister also her second one. But those kids were born in between that time period, and they didn't experience all of that, and for them to just see people getting killed in front of them, getting shot in front of them as they're trying to go to the airport, and seeing all these Talibs that are beating people in front of them, that are violently searching their houses and even hanging and crucifying people, they don't deserve that. That is so traumatizing for them. And every time I heard about their experiences, I just wish that I could be there and just take that away from them. And that's something that was just very hard for me. And so I'm very, very excited for the opportunities and the futures that these kids can have, because they're under 11 and they're already such big world changers. They're super motivated. They want to help the entire world. They're already such change makers, and I can already guarantee that not only America will benefit from these kids.
That's great. As a human rights activist, you're still in formation. You're a student, a very precocious student. You're very driven. I know that, having worked with you at the Cook Leadership Academy and also spoken to some of your professors at Calvin University. So what would you like to do next now that you've achieved your goal of getting your family out of Afghanistan? What is the next area that needs attention in your mind where you can make a difference as a human rights activist?
Yeah, thank you. So, to me, it's not only, this war isn't only about my family. Even before I was able to help my family, I was already trying to help other people. Just in case, like, just because my family can't get out doesn't mean that all these lives that I am able to help have to be sacrificed. And so now that they are in safety, I will continue to help out as many other young women that I can, as many as other Afghans that are very vulnerable and very risky situations out. And so, it's going to take a lot of strength, but I've taken time off work to volunteer my time, to do this. I can't imagine that right now we could be losing some of, tomorrow's leaders, some of these big world changers. And so I want to be able to at least try to give them the opportunities that I received, because who knows, maybe they will do something for the world that, our leaders from previous years, previous generations weren't able to do. And so that's where I'm dedicating my time for the next, who knows, maybe a few weeks if Biden does decide to extend the deadline of August 31st to withdraw the troops.
And I know that the Biden administration is considering extending the deadline because it's going to be important to get as many people out as possible. You look at all of the Americans that are still there, but then you look at all of the Afghan people who helped the allies, and we have a moral obligation to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Freshta, a minute ago, you mentioned 3 wars. For our American viewers and listeners, would you please recap what those 3 wars have been?
Yeah, so, my mom already experienced the Soviet invasion when they came into the country. And then obviously shortly after the first Taliban invasion, and now the second one. So, all 3 of those, although she was kind of prepared from her past experiences, no human being should have to endure such oppression and such persecution for just existing, that's it.
The Taliban are making lots of promises, and through diplomatic channels, they're trying to assure the world that they're going to be great guys. They're going to rule fairly and all. What's your opinion?
That is, excuse my language, but complete BS. And if anybody around the world, if any of our leaders will believe them, they will be nothing but fools. They have been having the peace talks for a long time now. And during all of those, they made all these agreements, but they did not follow through with any of those agreements. They continued to fail all of them. I even remember a couple of years ago when they had promised the Afghan government that for us to celebrate Nowruz, that they wouldn't blow up and they wouldn't blow anything up, any of the mosques, or have any type of explosions in the city. And it was 6 hours into the day when they attacked one of our mosques, and there were hundreds of people there. And I lost my friends in that attack. I lost, classmates that I went to school with. These are people who are so bloodthirsty that they will literally go any length to go after their extremist ideologies. They're just full of evil. They have no value in humanity. In fact, I don't even think they even know what humanity is. And, it's really important to look at their actions, because they can say and promise anything that they want, but their actions are what matter more. Unfortunately, their actions speak a much louder than words. And since their invasion of the country, the past couple of weeks, they have killed numerous people. They have crucified Christians. They have slaughtered and hung interpreters and journalists. And now they're hunting more journalists, especially female ones. And they have been forcing all these young girls at the age of 12 into sex slavery. So while they're carrying out their acts of jihad, they have their pleasure there. And, these are people who are the definition of liars, the definition of evil, the definition of extremism. And the fact that right now they are in such a strategic geographic location of the world, super close to China and Russia and Pakistan, the first countries that recognize them as a state. It's also very concerning for the rest of the world, especially America. For those minds to get together, I can guarantee you right now, they're already probably planning the downfall of America. And if they don't carry an act like 9/11, then probably something worse. And so, no, these are people who cannot be trusted with anything. They're out here in front of media saying, yes, we will allow our women to go to school, when literally my friends are telling me they shut down their university and told them there's no more university for girls anymore. when they said, oh yeah, women can still continue to be reporters on TV. And then right there behind the camera, they're shooting them and killing them. Like, this is just a game to them. A human life is a game to them.
Do you think the Taliban will be able to keep power for a long time in Afghanistan?
I really, really hope it's a no. Right now we have a group that's called the Northern Alliance in Panjshir. That's our only resistance group at the moment against the Taliban, and they're trying to negotiate, but it doesn't seem to be going well. And I hope that that resistance group is strong enough to overpower the Taliban, to kick them out, to completely, drive them away from all the other places that they came from. So that's where I have all my hope right now. But unfortunately, I'm also, just very conflicted because with their second invasion of the country, the Taliban this time they came with so many different weapons. Their weapons that they didn't have the first time they came. They have access to tanks, they have access to all these different types of technologies, and they have been hacking into all different systems, and that's how they have been hunting down SIV applicants. That's how they have been hunting down other Afghans that have been working with Western contractors. And so this, in a sense, these are not the same Taliban that came the first time. They're worse than the first time, and that should be a very concerning point for the rest of the world.
It's a pre-modern ideology. It is an extremist group of people. Taliban, I think, means students, right? These were students the first time around in the previous war, and they've matured in a battle-hardened way, and are, so far as I can tell, more extreme than ever with regard to their view of women, Western democracy, the West in general. They simply hate the West and its modernization. So let me ask you, Freshta, you have such an incredible perspective on this that Americans can learn a lot from. Where did America go wrong in all of this?
Obviously, sometimes I feel very guilty when I say, like, America shouldn't have withdrawn its troops, but because it should have been the Afghan government's duty to fulfill, their jobs and take care of the people and, make it a secure country. Unfortunately, when the US did get involved, they had a very big role. They played a bigger role than the Afghan government itself. And, this has been a war that's been happening, during the time of the terms of, different presidents. But with this chaos and crisis that happened, this is completely on Biden's hands. I feel like America went wrong just, this past month with everything that happened. That's where they went wrong the most.
Oh, I'm sorry, but I just want to make sure that people know who are watching this in, many months down the road. We're speaking at the end of August 2021.
Yeah, I guess American involvement in the country had been, helping a lot. There was a lot of progress that was happening in the country. And, like I said at the beginning of our conversation, I went from seeing all these women, completely covered up to now being on TV and dancing and singing and doing all types of things that they were completely banned from. And unfortunately, with Biden withdrawing all the troops and putting this deadline, not only put in jeopardy American lives, and it also, sacrificed so many Afghan lives, and all the advancement that my generation had worked so hard on, all of those developments were literally gone in 3 days. The Taliban burnt down our stadiums, they burnt down our parks, our universities, our schools. How do you expect for there to be hope, for there to be a future for a country when everything that, plays a big role in that process is completely eliminated? it's such a heartbreaking situation right now, because at this point, like, it's hard to see a future for Afghanistan that's not under terrorism.
What are the institutions that the Taliban have eliminated that will thwart the progress that the Afghan people have made? And what are the institutions that will take their place?
Yeah, so obviously, the very first big thing is all of those educational institutions. We were able to build and develop programs that were allowing our students to compete in international competitions. They were, for the first time since the Soviet invasion, Afghan students were able to speak multiple languages. They were able to travel abroad, study abroad. Just even the literacy rate had gone a lot higher than it had been, for the past 2 decades. All of our athletic institutions, for the first time in a very, very long time, we had national sports teams, and it actually involved a lot of women. So now all of those are eliminated. They set a bunch of them on fire this past week. And now even our government, our government wasn't the best. And the parliament, there was always so much chaos and no one was doing its job. But at least there was some signs of democracy. But now it's placed with this extremist dictatorship that only has to be operated with the Sharia law that these Talibans are going to place and everything has to be done the way that they see it. And I don't think you're going to be able to see any more women out in public. I don't think you're going to be able to see any more students going to study abroad or even going to school anymore. And, those are the sad parts, because those are some of the very important things that allow a country to be successful, allow a country to have a good economic situation. And just, right now, all of that's taken away, and it just makes me, I don't want to say hopeless, but just very concerned.
You just mentioned the word Sharia. I think for our American viewers and listeners, it's important to define what Sharia looks like. And Sharia changes from country to country. I mean, everybody in power, emphasizes certain aspects of Sharia and not necessarily all the things the Taliban would do. But for the Taliban, what does Sharia look like? You've mentioned some of the things, but I'd like to hear what you think Sharia will look like under the Taliban.
Yeah, so I've actually been watching, all of the press that they've had talking about what it's going to look like under the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. And they've said we will allow women to go to school only if they're going to abide by the Sharia codes of what women should be able to do. And for them, it's said that if they get out into public, everything needs to be covered. The only thing that can show is their eyes. And they can only get out in public if they have a man accompanying them. And for them, it also means that completely eliminating the Shias, and so which means all the Hazaras that are in the country. They, it hasn't been on the news as much, but the past week they have massacred groups of Hazaras in central Afghanistan. And the thing is that genocide is going to happen. The whole Hazara population might be eliminated, and with the world not knowing a single thing and not doing a single thing because it's already starting to be so late. Under them, it's only women, or I guess only men, who abide by their strict extremist laws will be able to breathe and survive. It's going to be hell for everyone there who wants some freedom, who wants to breathe, who want to be able to go to school, have a job, or just to even exist.
And we were talking about institutions and the change in the kinds of institutions that will be able to thrive under Taliban rule. And journalism is certainly, the press is certainly not one of those institutions. There's no recognition really of a free press under Sharia law as the Taliban conceive of it. Is that correct?
Yep. And I was reading like why they're so against it, and they think that it's that if you're going to be a true Muslim, you do not need entertainment because that is very distracting you from your faith, from how you should be following Islam. And unfortunately, I have a lot of Muslim friends. I come from a Muslim background. They don't think this way. They don't think that's what I guess like you said, it from group to group it differs how Sharia law is practiced and how people see it and view it. And so unfortunately, under the Taliban rule, it's you know heartbreakingly, and it's that way.
And I've heard that there have been many different ways of defining jihad. Some people emphasize it as spiritual struggle, moral struggle, mastery of the self and your community, within your family. But you're suggesting that jihad, as the Taliban would define it, is much more activist and could be actually a violent struggle, physically violent struggle. Is that correct?
Yeah, I actually think they use that as an excuse to um, carry out their violent ideologies that the rest of the world obviously disagrees with. I feel like they're using it as an excuse to um, cover them raping all these girls or raping all these women, for them to, kill all these people who oppose their beliefs, their values. That's, I guess, from, depending on what Muslim you ask, jihad that's not how it's defined under the Taliban rule. And I feel like the Taliban they always use all these Islamic views in a way that only benefits them, their selfish means and motives. They have been the number of women that were taken out of their houses this past week is, and for them to say this is what Sharia law says, and we're going to rape hundreds of women, even like during the first Taliban invasion, my mom would say the Taliban would carry out all these women out of their houses, especially Hazara women, and cut off their breasts and just load them in the trucks. And then they would go rape them, kill them, hang them upside down. These are all excuses under the Taliban. They have all these selfish means, and they're just covering it up by Islamic motives.
I can see why, going through all of these experiences, Freshta, why you have such a commitment to human rights. I think that your sense of the violation of human dignity is so keen because of all the stories you've heard, the friends you've lost, the family that have been threatened. I can see why you are motivated as you are. Are you ever afraid?
There was a time where I was afraid, and because I was very, very concerned for my family. And a few years ago, I was like, I'm done being afraid. I'm literally fighting for my voice, for my family's voice, for my people's voice. And if they want to come after me, come after my family, if they feel like shooting me is going to stop a revolution, then they can try that. But I have hope that there's so many other people, besides me, that are going to bring so much change, that they will bring a revolution. And no, I'm not afraid anymore. And to me, that is like such a big motivation, because when you don't have that and you stay silent, there is no way change can be made. And because of the massacres that they continue to carry, all the different ways that they are violating human rights, keep pushing me to not be afraid. It just keeps pushing me to pursue freedom for all of these people, on behalf of these people, to wake up the rest of the world, to wake up all these policymakers, to just shake them and let them know, like, this is what you're allowing to happen and you're not doing anything about it. And so to me, that's been a big motivation for me to continue bringing justice for the rest of the world.
Well, your story is inspiring. I want to ask you, why do other countries keep getting Afghanistan wrong? You can go all the way back. I mean, certainly the United States has gotten it wrong. Most powerful nation that has ever existed on the face of the earth. $2 trillion later, lots of loss of life and suffering, trying to nation build, didn't work. The Soviets certainly found out that they couldn't mess with Afghanistan. In fact, there have been a lot of arguments that it was the Afghanistan debacle that led to the downfall of the Soviet empire. You go back to the 19th century, the British, I think, fought 3 wars in Afghanistan. They could not tame the country. Go back any century you want to choose, again and again. Western powers, surrounding neighbors, nations that think they can master Afghanistan never seem to be able to do it. Go all the way back to Alexander the Great, where he said the only way I'm going to be able to get along with these people is by marriage, make love, not war. And he marries one of the tribal princesses, the chieftain's princess, Roxanne. So some people learn, but most do not, about the plans to invade Afghanistan, what the result's going to be. In your own words, in your own view, Freshta, what is it about Afghanistan?
Yeah, I think a lot of people get Afghanistan wrong because they literally, when they look at Afghanistan, I guess the media doesn't really help either, but when they look at Afghanistan, they literally think even the Afghan civilians are the Taliban. And that is something that I had to keep educating people on when I moved to the States. I remember like the first time they were like, I came here, people at school were like, so like, is your dad like part of the terrorist group? Like, I'm like, no, you guys have it completely wrong. Like, yes, unfortunately, we have a lot of terrorism in the country, but the rest of the world is so focused on all the negative things on Afghanistan that they forget that we are human, that we also have achievements on top of everything else, all the struggles that we have. Like in the Olympics, we got a gold medal in Taekwondo. The world never cheered, the world never shared, the world never, applauded us for that. Yet the world continues to like point fingers at us, at all the negative things that happen and all the ways that, human rights are violated by all these terrorist groups who are just so thirsty for power and they're willing to get it in whatever way that they want. And so, that's one way that I hope the world changes its views, that they get more educated, that they look into our, history and everything that our country brings. Before the Soviet invasion, Afghanistan was just like the rest of the Western world. We had jazz happening everywhere. There were women in skirts and balls, and it was no different than any other Western civilization. But then after that, everything that it went through, we had to adjust to the different types of lives, to the different regimes that were brought on us, or else we didn't have a way of survival.
I'm so glad that you're also talking about the positive contributions, the potential of Afghanistan. And what would you say is Afghanistan's greatest gift to its neighbors and to the world?
Yeah, I think Afghanistan has really been from my experience and everywhere that other cultures that I've interacted with, one of the most hospitable cultures ever. And on top of that, like, we are so rich in history and the arts, and that's something that the world doesn't see. There's so much architecture, there's so much art and music and poetry that were left there, from, like you said, from the times when Alexander the Great was there, from just generations before, centuries before. And that's something that, like, the world forgets. Like, we had all these palaces, we had all these kingdoms, and those are things that the world doesn't know. And I feel like if they did know, they would understand why so many people try to take over the country. And not only because of those great things, but also because Afghanistan is such a strategic location. And on top of that, it has so many different minerals that the rest of the world could really benefit from.
Freshta, you're giving us a view of Afghanistan that I think gives us hope that once the Taliban are kicked out, once they are subdued, taken away, that hopefully the Afghan people will be able to reassert themselves in their rightful place in the community of nations and offer to the rest of the world all these wonderful gifts that you're talking about. It's really an inspiring picture of what
Yeah.
Afghanistan can be. And I'm so glad that we're talking about that too. So glad that we've been able to talk about the happy news about your family being able to get out of Kabul and to a safe place. We wish them well. Stay in touch. Let us know their fate, how they're doing, and especially let us know when you're reunited with them.
I will. Yes, I am definitely excited to share that great news for the rest of the world. You know, I haven't seen some of my family members for almost a decade. So this will definitely be a very memorable time in my life.
Well, Freshta, I know that the last week or so, 2 weeks, just been enormously stressful for you and busy, and it took us several tries to be able to do this webcast, podcast, and I'm just so glad that we're able to do it. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me and our viewers and listeners at the Gerald R. Ford Foundation. We wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Gleaves. It's always so great to have these conversations with you. It's such a gift, and I always really appreciate these moments.
Well, you're a gift to us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We will be back again soon for another edition of Exploring the Question.